All right, here we go. We're starting all over again, except I'm not going to ask you that rhetorical question. We're going to start with the world of work. A lot of you in this room are thinking about what you're going to be doing a year from now, 2, 3, 4 years from now. You're thinking about what your college education means and where you're headed. And there's probably a bit of anxiety, and I don't blame you. I mean, the numbers don't look good. And frankly, the statistics, you know, it's kind of tough out there for college grads. Very few college graduates get the dream job, the job of their choice. Very few get a job that pays really well. Most college grads who get a job that they have to work their rear ends off for and get paid pitifully poor for. So the trends are not so happy. Okay, so here we have joblessness. Joblessness since the recession and beyond. And you can see that things are going to get a bit better, according to the White House. There's some other folks who don't see things so swimmingly, and they remind us of this all the time. These are the experts, the unemployment experts, the labor experts. It can get very, very annoying. So look where we are, 9.3 at the end of 2011. Now, low wages. If you happen to be getting a job in a recession, you know that your wages are going to be depressed. Unfortunately, the numbers show, and history shows, that if you start with low wages, it takes you an awfully long time to build those wages up. In fact, after 10 years, you're still not going to be where somebody else has gotten to, certainly not, who has gotten a job in an economy that is a much more robust one. So it's very, very difficult. When you start low, it's very hard to sort of shake the low wage. But there are ways to get around that, and we'll talk about that too. A lot of people are unhappy. There's a huge buzz about joblessness and all the implications. And if it's Occupy Burlington or Occupy LA, there are a lot of issues swirling around joblessness. Now, Occupy DC is in McPherson Square, which just happens to be across from where I work. It's just a couple of blocks from where the president works. And they make demonstrations several times a day, generally latter part of the afternoon. And there are a lot of folks with a lot of unease in this park, and a lot of folks who are your age, who are very worried about their futures. I chanced upon this poster that was sort of rubbed in the mud. And it says, "I followed my dreams like I was always told to do and went to college. I'm $125,000 in debt with no job and little hope in sight. This isn't a dream, it's a nightmare." Well, the person who wrote this poster has a lot of company. And I guess misery loves company, but this is not the company you want to keep. It's tough stuff. That college loan debt, we've been hearing a lot about it, spiraling toward $1 trillion collectively around the country. As you know, taking out college loans is a risk. It's a risk you assume because you have the notion that once you graduate from college, you have the capacity, you have the skills, you have the education, and hopefully the drive to recoup what you've invested in that education. But a lot of folks are asking, if they can't get a job and they've got all this debt, how do they recoup that investment in their education? Well, I want to talk to you about making the most of where you are. I don't have to tell this audience about foreign languages, but everybody who graduates with a 4-year degree should graduate not speaking just one language. How are you going to take on the world speaking English? If you're going to take on the world, you have to have at least 2 tongues or more. If the lower left-hand corner is all you can read on this slide, well, enough said. Languages are critically important. Critically important. You've heard, "Go west, young man." Go east, young woman. Go north, go south, go. I don't have to convince this crowd that foreign travel is important. But go, and if you're going to teach English in China, as you're taking on that job, which is fantastic, and maybe you'll learn Mandarin or start to, which is critical, also seek out a job with one of the fastest growing companies in the world, and there are thousands of them in China. Go seek them out. See what they're about. If you're interested in social services, go to a remote village in Africa where abject poverty is so intense that every hand makes a difference. Go work in an AIDS clinic. Go to the Middle East. Learn Arabic. I'll just talk a bit about my own personal risk. I was working in New York, and I was working abroad for all manner of magazines and journals, and I really wanted to work for a top-rate daily newspaper. It's impossible to break in. Journalism, very tough field, and at this time in my life, it was extremely difficult. I had to make a difference. I had to distinguish myself. I had to stand out. To do that, I had to take a risk, no question. So that's when this man came into my life. 1989, after the Iran-Iraq War, I sent myself to Baghdad. And I sent myself there because very few people knew much about Iraq. In fact, I had 2 books I could read on Iraq that were written about by contemporary American writers, one of whom I later learned was paid by the regime to write about Iraq and all of its fabulousness. So very little was known. What was written in the news or what was reported was by remote, and it was poorly done. And I went to Iraq. I was a single American female Jewish journalist, not very popular in that part of the world at that time. It was very, very chancy, but I did it. And I convinced the Iraqis that I would report on post-war economic reconstruction, which I thought was extremely interesting. And I fell into a story about dual-use military buildup and using civilian, what were supposed to be civilian goods imported from China, from Russia, from the United States, and were converted for military use. So I sort of fell into the hospital in Iraq and stayed there for a number of weeks because I was poisoned. And my tapes and my notes and everything was rifled through when I came out. I got out of the country, and I came back to the United States, and I got a job with the daily newspaper. A few months thereafter, Saddam thought it would be a good idea to go into Kuwait. Suddenly, there was this huge need to know about Iraq. Where was it on the map? We had members of Congress who were, screaming throughout the day and the night, Saddam Hussein. No one could pronounce his name, and these were folks who were voted members of Congress. So it was a big deal for me. It was a risk really worth taking, and I covered post-war economic reconstruction stories for real for decades thereafter. So I covered, the end of the Cold War in Central and Eastern Europe and in former Soviet Union. I covered former Yugoslavia. I covered, and that was deconstruction. This is reconstruction in former Yugoslavia. And these are some very restive natives who have just come back from the front. You can see the shells, and the mortar sort of pockmarks on the buildings. And I really, it's a little hazy here because I was a little unnerved taking this photo because they were not too happy that I was taking this photo, and rape was really a national pastime in many of these countries because it was a weapon of war, and I was uneasy as an American with a camera by myself, so that was a little blurry. But folks who were not working, who were back from the front, and have hopelessness are really bound toward violence. And there are scars from war that just linger. I mean, joblessness lingers, but so do all the problems that people suffer during the war. You know, Muslim women were horribly treated, raped, fled. You know, you've all heard of Srebrenica, fled into the forest, came back months later. Here's a woman sitting with her grandchildren. But these scars, these are very difficult to fade away. So we heard about Mozambique and post-war Mozambique. It's not only combating war, the conventional war. It's nature's war. It's flooding. It's what, you know, the resulting famine, and refugee status sometimes is years and years and years or decades. It's also a very stubborn thing to shake. And then there's the war, the domestic war, the war on crime that really came well after the war on poverty. We lost that war on poverty, as we all know. This is in Arkansas, when I was covering Bill Clinton and his first campaign. It was all about the economy, stupid. You may have remembered that phrase. We're still stupid because it's still all about the economy. And in Arkansas, at the time, there were 30 gangs. 30 gangs who were really taking great license in economically deprived areas. So we accept food stamps, going out of business sale. Pretty much says it all. And this is still Little Rock. So that's risk. That's my own personal risk. But there's so many ways you can assume risk. STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. This is the acronym for one of the biggest holes we have and one of the biggest opportunities we have in this country. Yes, we do have a shortage of STEM talent. We need innovators. We need creators. We need folks with tremendous orchestrated imaginations. We need folks who can take what's on the shelves, all this intellectual property that's on the shelves in our national and our federal labs, and there are thousands of inventions just stored, waiting to be commercialized, waiting to come to market. How do we do that? We need folks like you who might be interested in these fields, the STEM fields, to take that chance. That's a wonderful chance to take because it's all about entrepreneurship. It's all about innovation. The federal government is so concerned about boosting entrepreneurship in this country and boosting economic growth that they are now considering ways to give the likes of you, budding entrepreneurs who are graduating from college, the opportunity to help commercialize all of these wonderful, wonderful innovations waiting to come to market. But unhappily, while college enrollments grow, we have pitifully low levels of science, technology, engineering, and math focus in this country, and we need to boost it. This is an enormous opportunity for any college-age student looking at the world of work. Not only is the enrollment low, but the staying power is low. 50% of folks who embark on STEM studies drop out. 90% of the dropouts say it's because they had poor teaching. 70% of those who stay in say they had poor teaching. So, take the risk. Demand great teachers. Take another risk. If you're interested in STEM, stick to it. Get out there, get a mentor. Connect with a business, whether it's an architect's firm or an engineering firm or music technology or community economic development that's looking how to do homeless shelters by scale, and they're using mathematics. STEM applies to every social sector, every civics, and certainly every hard science. Take on technical skills. Become a welder over the summer. There's a 500,000 shortage in the welding occupation, and that's cutting across a lot of occupational cuts, from the most rudimentary skills to the most sophisticated PhD nuclear physicist. This is a big deal. Welding, 500,000 jobs open. You can take a 12-week course over the summer. Connect with a union, connect with a company. Take a course, see if it turns you on, see if it gives you a little spark. Couldn't resist. Network. Not only network and meet all these folks, network with each other, help each other. You have a very large network. Penn State has a 500,000 alum network. You maybe have a 25,000 alum network. Maximize it. Help each other, love each other. Now, respect your elders. Why? The two biggest pressures on joblessness and job generation, the would-be new entrants, the 16 to 24-year-olds, you, who may have the education, don't have the experience, probably don't have the skills to enter the workforce, and the mature talent, the 50 to 55-year-olds and older who are experienced, who do have talent, who have a lot of know-how and a lot of wisdom, which you can't put a price on. This latter, the mature workers, are the single largest, by far, single largest demographic group in the workforce. So if you're thinking that by the time you graduate, these old folks are going to be nearing retirement, you're wrong. They're going to be your colleagues in your job. It behooves you to get to know them, to tap into their knowledge, to work as a team with them, to take them on as mentors. This may surprise you. Kauffman Foundation did a study on the fastest growing, the most successful, the greatest numbers of entrepreneurs. That group is not the 20, 30, something upstarts. That group is in the 50s and 60s, as in years old, in tech firms. Even the tech firm folks, the startups, are 50 and 65-year-old folks. Why? They have the talent, they have the network, they have the failure that they picked themselves up from to succeed again, and they have access to capital. No small matter. Okay. One risk not worth taking. I was going to put a crazy picture up here, but I didn't want to compromise anyone's identity. Your online reputation matters. It matters in a major way. Microsoft commissioned a study to see how HR directors use social media as a determinant of whether someone is a good hire, a good possible hire or not. Almost 80% of HR directors, human resource directors, folks doing the hiring, and just straight out employers, use social media. They scan it. And if you think that you can just remove your image or change your name to protect the guilty, no, no, no. Don't put anything screwy on this that's going to compromise your opportunities later. Don't do it. 70% of those folks, the folks doing the hiring and the employers, 70% of them said, after checking, 70% of them had the experience where they did not make the hire. It was a deal breaker because of what they saw online. Now, after all this work, all this investment, all this excitement, this incredible intellectual capital and zest for doing things, why would you mess yourself up with some silly posting? So, congratulations on graduating into an economy that won't let you leave home for another 10 years. And yes, rent is due no later than the 3rd. Your picture here? Maybe. I hope not. But the importance of taking on risk and maximizing your opportunities and taking the initiative and reaching out and having the confidence matters, absolutely matters the most. Good luck.